I'd like to welcome Bill Paternotte, our board chair. Bill, thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Bill Paternotte, and it's my honor to chair the board of the Adirondack Land Trust. Welcome to our 2021 annual meeting, and thank you for attending. As Mary posted in the chat a moment ago, we have nearly 100 people signed up for our meeting. After more than a year of operating remotely, we look forward to seeing you in person next year. We have a good deal to cover today, but we expect to wrap up by about 11:30. And just FYI, we've been having some internet issues here in Keene Valley. There was a pretty severe storm last night. So if for some reason we all get disconnected, we're hoping that you understand. To give you a quick sense of our agenda today, once I've covered a few formalities and a bit about the year just concluded, Executive Director Mike Carr will talk about our most important asset, which is our team. Then I'll come back and introduce you to 3 new board members. Most important, Mike will then review the past year in Adirondack conservation, the people who make it happen, and our current conservation priorities. And finally, we'll hear a discussion by 2 experts working on the front lines of regional farming and food about the role of farmland protection and the Adirondack food system. We invite you to submit questions for a brief Q&A after that discussion in the Q&A function in Zoom. So looking back over fiscal 2021, I'm pleased to say that ALT concluded another strong year. It was our 4th full year as an independent organization. We expanded our footprint geographically and our conservation activities. Financially, we raised nearly $1 million in annual operating support and received several meaningful capital gifts, including funds to support our summer internship program. Importantly, we ran a balanced budget. Our total endowment assets are now closing in on $10 million, and we have about $3.5 million in wild Adirondacks, which is the fund that we draw on when needed to take advantage of opportunities to protect land through occasional purchases with a plan to resell that property to the state. Staffing wise, we added an experienced director of land conservation, and we're in the process of adding 3 new board members. More about these additions in a few minutes. Now it's my pleasure to turn the meeting over to Mike Carr, our executive director of now 21 years. Mike is known to just about all of you and is truly the face of our organization. It's my pleasure to work closely with Mike and his team on a week-to-week basis, and the energy and dedication they bring to protecting our lands and waters is truly inspirational. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Bill. And it is a great honor to work with a leader like Bill Paternotte. He's so capable and makes himself available to the board and staff. So we're grateful. As he said, the theme today is really about people as our greatest resource, in addition to place. Thank you to all of you who made time to join us today. It's a great treat for us to be able to share some of the successes. We have about 770 supporters of the Land Trust of all stripes from all over the country. They're the people that make all of the work we're about to talk about possible, and many of you, we count among that group. I'd like to start with a brief introduction of one of our newest members of the team, our summer intern, Zoe Turner-Debs. She was selected from a pool of 64 candidates for the internship for the future of the Adirondacks this summer. She's working with our geographic information system mapping software to help us improve land management and to identify the most important places for conservation action, to focus the resources that you share with us in the most important places. This internship was created by Barbara Glazer and Ed Petty on behalf of the Trust for Clarence Petty. Barbara's a member of our board and was also honored by the Adirondack Council this year as their Conservationist of the Year. On to the staff. We currently have a team of 11 with 169 years of conservation experience among them. I'll introduce them by department. Our first team is made up of Susie Runyon, who is our finance and office manager, in addition to Mary Thill, our communications manager. Our philanthropy team of 3 includes Kimberly Corwin Gray, our Associate Director of Philanthropy, Nancy Van Wee, our Director of Philanthropy, and Kathy Woofter, our Philanthropy and Outreach Coordinator. Our conservation team is growing, but currently consists of Bill Brown as our Conservation Manager, Becca Halter as our Stewardship and GIS Specialist, Chris Jage, the newest member of our team, as Director of Conservation, Doug Monroe as Stewardship Manager, and Megan Zach Stevenson, our Land Protection Manager. Notably, Megan changed her last name last Saturday. She married on Chapel Island on Upper Saranac Lake, and several of us had the privilege of joining she and her now husband, Dwight. On to our volunteer team. We really could not accomplish all we do without the volunteers. We just could not cover as much ground. In spite of COVID, over the past year, 30 individuals stepped up to help us with a number of projects across the park, including planting pollinator habitat at Glenview Preserve in Harrodstown. They also helped us clear trails at properties we own outright in fee. They helped us control invasive species at Coon Mountain Preserve in Westport over in the Champlain Valley. And they led interpretive field trips at conservation sites around the park. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a member of our philanthropy team, Kathy Woofter, who is leading a new initiative, our Next Gen Council. Kathy?
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everybody. We are so pleased to get the Next Generation Council off the ground with a group of 15 charter members who you'll see on the screen right now, who represent a variety of professions as well as geographic locations, both inside and outside the park. So there's a lot of diversity in the group, but they all have at least one thing in common, which is a really strong interest in the health and sustainability of the Adirondack Park and the shared value that the park is a place for all people to enjoy and to safeguard. We held our first quick introductory meeting over Zoom, but the true kickoff will be in person at our Keene office in mid-August. We're going to meet 3 times a year with additional opportunities for networking for those Next Gen Council members who are interested in that. And at our meeting, we're going to dive into a wide range of topics. So just a few examples might include accessibility and diversity in our outdoor spaces, conservation priorities, environmental justice, food systems, fundraising strategies, and much more, including topics that our Next Gen Council members bring to us. So it's not just a one-way street here. We are also talking about developing a signature event that will be planned and run by our Next Gen Council to raise awareness and possibly raise funds for a topic that they choose. So our staff and board are really depending on our members to share their perspectives, provide opinions, and share their knowledge from their broad range of professions and identities, and also to challenge us when we need it, of course. So our goal is for younger people not just to feel included in conservation decisions that shape the park, but actually to be included. And you can see from the slide on the screen right now that that's the #1 thing that our members want. In return for their time and perspective, we will provide the group with networking opportunities, learning experiences that will help them start or advance their careers, and opportunities to meet new people and hopefully make lifelong friends. So I want to just close quickly by thanking everybody who referred people to apply. The response was just beyond anything that I imagined, including our board chair, Bill Paternote, whose granddaughter Brooke is part of the council, Director Ann Stuzen, whose daughter Maddie has joined, several Adirondack Land Trust supporters, and even a few former interns and current Next Gen council members who referred their friends. So if you know somebody who would be great for our council, please send them to our website to learn more, as we're going to be starting another recruiting cycle within a few months. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Mike Carr.
Thank you, Kathy. It's such hopeful work with the next generation of conservationists. It's my pleasure to reintroduce Bill Paternotte, who will take us through some remarks concerning the board.
Thanks, Mike. We are very pleased to have a highly engaged board of 21 directors. We meet 4 times a year, and the group is deeply involved with the staff in our committee work, which is really the grassroots level in which we function. Today, we're delighted to welcome 3 new board members whose 3-year terms officially begin at the annual meeting of the board on August 12th, but I'm going to introduce them to you now. First is Timothy Fritzinger, who began attending board meetings last fall and is already making a significant contribution to our work. Timo has a BA, MBA, and master's in forestry, all from Yale University. He started his career at Hancock Timber Resource Group, where he worked as a research analyst and a transaction manager. He currently manages Brooknall Advisors LLC, which is an independent investment advisory firm that works with institutional investors to source, diligence, and manage real estate investments. Previously, he served as an investment director at Alta Advisors Limited, a private investment firm in London, where he oversaw real asset investments globally. Timo is a chartered financial analyst at CFA, charter holder. He lives in Wenham, Massachusetts, and is on the board of the Greenbelt Land Trust. His experience from that board has been very helpful in our work as well. I've known Timo personally for many years and enjoyed hiking with him in the Adirondacks. And in fact, I was with him when he completed his 46th peak, way back when he was probably 14 or 15 years old. So welcome, Timo. Second, joining our board is Lisa Guide, who is Associate Director of the Rockefeller Family Fund, a public charity focused on climate change and the environment, economic justice for women, and democracy. She's also a co-founder of the Women Effect Fund and the Women Effect Action Fund. Prior to joining Rockefeller, Lisa served in several positions in the Clinton administration, White House, and Department of the Interior, including Acting Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Policy, Management, and Budget, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and International Affairs, and Communications Manager for the White House Council on Environmental Quality. She's a New Jersey native and a graduate of Douglas College at Rutgers University. She divides her time between Alexandria, Virginia, and North River, New York. Importantly, Lisa adds representation to our board from a part of the park in which we become more active in the last couple of years. More about that later. Finally, Peter Payne. Peter needs really no introduction to this group. He has been on our board for many years. He reached his term limit a year ago and took a year off, but we're very glad to welcome him back on the board. He's a former chair of the Adirondack Land Trust, and his board service spans more than 2 decades or longer, back to the days when we had no board term limits. And like his board service, his contributions to Adirondack land and water conservation are also limitless. Peter is the host of our annual Flat Rock concert and has done that for many years, something we're very appreciative of. I've had the pleasure of overlapping on the board with Peter off and on for almost 20 years and found him to be insightful and deeply knowledgeable about all things Adirondack. Please welcome me in please join me in welcoming Timo, Lisa, and Peter to the board. Mike, back over to you.
Thank you, Bill. My next task is to just walk us through some of the conservation that's happened over the past year that really you've made possible. The Land Trust was founded in 1984, so we're 37 years young. And over that time period, we've completed 92 projects totaling 26,710 acres. Really, the support of people like you has allowed the Adirondack Land Trust to make land protection work not just for the ecological integrity of the Adirondack Park, but also for our communities and for all those of us who love and appreciate this place. That acreage total, 26,710 acres, includes 51 conservation easements spanning 16,000 acres. And embedded within that are 20 working farms in the Champlain Valley. That number is about to grow by 2. Additionally, 4,400 acres of forever wild forest preserve additions and 2 preserves totaling 600 acres. Today, we'd like to talk briefly about 2 projects completed in the past year. Both are examples of how small but strategic land purchases can have wider impact and protect New York's collective investment in the Adirondack Forest Reserve, which has been protected as forever wild since 1895. It's my great pleasure to introduce Megan Zach Stevenson, our land protection manager. Megan.
Thanks, Mike. And before I go into updates on our conservation efforts, I'd like to note that the Adirondack Land Trust staff and board have been learning and reflecting on a variety of topics within diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have adopted the following statement. We acknowledge that we work in the homeland of the Mohawk and Oneida Nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Abenaki Nation of the Wabanaki Confederacy. As an organization that advances conservation primarily through ownership and care of land, the Adirondack Land Trust also acknowledges that we have a lot to learn about the different notions of ownership in this region's lands, as well as about reciprocity and balance in the stewardship of this place. We are committed to listening, learning, and pursuing a fuller understanding. Last year, I mentioned 2 properties that will eventually be added to the forest preserve, both of which ALT now owns and will hold until we can transfer over to the state. The first is on 13th Lake, 17 acres and just over 100 feet of shoreline in Johnsburg, Warren County, that we protected in partnership with generous donors from the Friends of 13th Lake and members of the local community, with support from Town Supervisor Andrea Hogan and our state partners at the Department of Environmental Conservation. All of us came together to achieve the landowners, Woody and Elise Woodland's, vision for this property to remain undeveloped and part of the Siamese Ponds wilderness. The second is just 1 town over in Minerva, Essex County. 60 acres of forest land in the Vanderwacker Wild Forest. Conservation of this property closes an inholding in the forest preserve to enhance wildlife connectivity. This project was also completed in partnership with local and state government. Both properties are not open to the public yet, but will be once they are part of the forest preserve. And looking forward, we are actively working with landowners on 27 projects totaling over 13,500 acres across 5 counties in the park. Specifically, we are working on another forest preserve addition of just over 100 acres in Essex County near a popular hiking destination, and 4 farmland protection projects encompassing 468 acres of family-owned farms and riparian forest buffers along a combined 1.8 miles of the north branch of the Boquet River, an important aquatic resource for salmon and a major tributary to Lake Champlain. So a very exciting year ahead, and I'll send it back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Megan. We'll turn to our farmland protection work for the next section of the agenda. It's really always been a big part of the Adirondack Land Trust work. As I mentioned, we currently hold conservation easements on 20 working farms totaling 6,377 acres and are about to protect 2 more. We'd like to ask for your help. We're investing in an additional staff person to lead our agricultural work. Our search is open until the 2nd of August. We're looking for a person to work with producers, landowners, and partners to achieve lasting conservation for farmlands and their communities. So if you know of anyone who might be interested, please point them to our webpage where the job description is posted. Thank you. Over the past year, the Adirondack Land Trust has re-engaged in farmland protection in other ways. We're partnering in Essex County with Carly Summers and the Cornell Cooperative Extension to reach out to farmland owners who need help planning the future of their lands. And through the leadership of Becca Halter on our conservation team, we're participating in several regional farming initiatives, including the Adirondack Food Systems Network. We'll hear more about that new initiative today and about the role of farmland protection in putting healthy local food on our plates. I'm honored to introduce 2 people doing important work around farming in our region. The first, Holly Rippon Butler, is a member of the Adirondack Land Trust Board and the Land Campaign Director for the National Young Farmers Coalition, which is a grassroots network of farmers and ranchers that advocates for policy change, builds farmer networks, and provides business services to help young farmers succeed. She splits her time between her family's multi-generational dairy and beef farm in Schuylerville near Saratoga Springs and the Champlain Valley, where she established her own craft ice cream business, Farmer's Cone Creamery. The Land Trust is fortunate to have the benefit of Holly's regional and national perspective on food justice, farmland protection, and policy. Over to you, Holly.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very happy to be speaking to you all. As Mike mentioned, I grew up on my family's dairy farm in Schuylerville, New York, which is just outside of the Adirondack Park. My first experiences with the Adirondacks were hiking in the mountains and exploring its lakes and streams. It wasn't until I was older and living in the Champlain Valley that I began to appreciate the rich agricultural landscape that's woven into the fabric of the park as well. Stewardship of this land is part of a long legacy that began with Indigenous people, including the Mohawk, Oneida, Abenaki, and Mohican. The story of human interaction with this land is much deeper than what is often remembered and discussed, but must inform how we think about what is possible and necessary to live in a just world. Land is at the heart of climate resilience, racial equity, economic prosperity, food sovereignty, and public health. It's critical that we see it not as a commodity fueling economic growth, but rather a vital resource that we all depend on and bear responsibility for. That's why I'm so glad to be part of the work that the Adirondack Land Trust does. ALT and Land Trust in general are critical local organizations working to protect land for the collective good. There are 3 things in particular that I hope to share with you today about food and farming in the Adirondacks. The first is the vibrancy of agriculture and the uniqueness of our food system here. The second is the role that the people, the stewards of the land, play in building this vibrant system. And third, I want to point out that the work these people do doesn't happen in a vacuum. It depends on the land and the critical support they receive from numerous community-led organizations. So in my role as an advocate with the National Young Farmers Coalition, I've been lucky to have the opportunity to travel around the country for the past 7 years, meeting farmers, talking to elected officials, and working with land trusts. Over those same years, I've come home from each trip to experience the farming community shifting and evolving in the Adirondacks as farms start, stop, persist, transition, and grow alongside the businesses that support them. I've gotten to be a small part of that and starting my ice cream business here. From that perspective, I can say that this region is really special. It's made unique in part by its geography, a landscape that limits production, population density, and travel, as well as dictates a short and unpredictable growing season. Those factors have shaped how food is grown, distributed, and enjoyed here, creating a tightly knit network of people producing high quality products that are largely available within a few miles of where they're grown. The food system here is unique for its influence beyond the park too. Trucks leave daily carrying food to surrounding metro areas, and the model that's being built here of how a collaborative food economy can work is one that other regions are looking to and emulating as well. Something that sums it all up for me is the joy of eating a local burger after a long hike with a fresh tomato, local cheese on top, sandwiched between a bun baked that morning from grains grown within the park. That's possible. And I've come to see agriculture here not just as a liminal area between the mountains and water, but an integral part of the whole landscape. No farmland, no post-hike burger. So this interconnection is unique to this region, and it's worth celebrating. The fact that you can finish a hike and eat a local burger is fortunate, but it's not fortuitous. It's the result of very intentional labor, knowledge, and risk taken on by a lot of people. Farming is a tricky business. The economics are tough and success is far from guaranteed. But the biggest challenge is land. Secure land access is critical for farmers to do the work that they do, but it's increasingly out of reach. Farmland values continue to rise, and farmers are competing with non-farming individuals for that land. The Adirondacks are special in that we have a lot of land, more than 58,000 acres of farmland, according to the most recent ag census. But that doesn't make it a place that is immune from the larger trends sweeping the country. In fact, in many ways, it's more vulnerable. As the climate crisis intensifies and population grows, the Adirondacks have become a more desirable place to live. Changes in technology and norms are making it more possible for people to work remotely. And over the past year, this has been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I've heard from farmers experiencing unprecedented competition for land, making it nearly impossible for them to access the long-term security they need. Besides the land, another thing that makes the Adirondacks special is the depth of agricultural expertise held by the existing farming community. Young farmers benefit immeasurably from this, whether it's a shared piece of knowledge, equipment, or the actual work of clearing and tilling the land that's come before them. Nationally, we're in a moment of farm transition. As the previous generation of farmers ages out, the average age of farmers is increasing and millions of acres of land are expected to change hands in the next few decades. This represents an incredible opportunity, but it also creates urgency. This moment requires intention and naming what we want the future of agriculture to look like in the park. We need to see the interconnection with national trends and take action. The good news is there are numerous people already taking these steps. I hope that you come to see this farming community as I do, more than just our neighbors and friends and faces at the farmers market. These individuals are leaders and innovators, demonstrating how commitment to place can translate into livable, resilient communities. But they need our help. And that is where organizations and supporters come in. As a recent report from the Essex County Food System Strategic Planning Effort pointed out, a holistic approach to improving Essex County's food system requires connecting the dots between land and agriculture, long-term food production, farm viability, supply chains, access to healthy food, food security, diet-related health problems, and the economic opportunity that results when all these components are tied together. That's a lot, but it's also exciting. We must work together, and it must start with the land. As community-led organizations, land trusts have deep connections to real estate, farming communities, and access to public dollars. These are the kinds of resources that we need to create solutions that respond to our unique environment, support the individuals who are doing the work of land stewardship, and ensure secure land tenure is available to farmers in the Adirondacks. I'm seeing land trusts around the country step up to play this role, and I'm really excited for where this work is headed with ALT. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Brittany Christensen from ADK Action, who will speak to the incredible food systems work that her organization is doing along with numerous others in the park. And I hope that you'll join me in seeing yourselves as part of this food system that I've been describing. in believing in and supporting the power of land trusts and community organizations like ADK Action, and in engaging with policy advocacy. I hope you'll join me in viewing ourselves as collective stewards of the Adirondacks, with farmland and those who steward it as a critical component. And most importantly, I hope you'll join me in purchasing and celebrating local food and really enjoying that burger. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce Brittany Christensen. She was hired as ADK Action's first full-time executive director in 2016. She's led the organization to new heights, pioneering food security projects and increasing ADK Action's impact and visibility throughout the region. Prior to her work with ADK Action, Brittany was a farmer and farm operations manager for Fledging Crow Vegetables and a community nutrition coordinator at the North Country Healthy Heart Network. Among other community work, Brittany serves on the steering committee of the Essex County Farmland Protection Plan and is co-chair of the Adirondack Food Systems Network. She and her family live on 30 wooded acres on a dead-end road in Keysville. We're honored that she's taking time today to share her unique perspective with us. Brittany.
Thanks for the introduction, Mike. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, and that's food systems. I hope when I'm done talking, you'll agree with me that a community-based food system in the Adirondacks is possible, and the time to make it happen is now. So a bit of my own story. I spent my 20s helping establish an organic vegetable farm in Keysville. And the way that I ended up there was that my husband met a traveler in Ecuador who was from Plattsburgh that had acquired an agreement with his professor in college to farm some land. And so very roundabout way of finding my way to the Adirondacks from Montana. But after college, I moved out here to help the guys establish the farm. I had no idea that I would fall in love with farming. The farm had about 3 acres in production when I arrived. And by the time I started working at ADK Action, the farm had over 60 acres in production. The expansion happened incrementally, and a neighbor would show up offering up a hayfield for production, for example, or a retired farmer down the road would express sadness that their fields lay fallow and they weren't able to see things being produced and pulled from the fields anymore. And so year after year, we acquired additional lands through handshakes, contracts, and payments, and we would rent, lease, or buy, or informally borrow the land and grow more and more food. As the farm grew, so did our need for labor. I worked alongside migrant farm workers from Jamaica, nomadic youth who traded labor for room, board, and travel money, local kids with parents who believed in sustainable farming and wanted their kids to learn the value of hard work. We used to spend all spring seeding and watering tender plant starts in the propagation house. And when the weather turned warm enough, we'd transplant these veggies out in the fields. We used a water wheel transplanter, which is this incredible implement that hooks up to the back of a tractor. And you sit on the implement, and as the tractor drives along, it pokes holes in the earth and puts a solution of water and fish emulsion in the holes so that you can plug the plants in. That's the only time I've ever experienced flow. I don't know if you've heard of this term of flow, but when you are so engaged in something that everything just floats away. The tractor was going fast. We had thousands of transplants to get in the ground before nightfall. And so all that I had room to do was the task at hand. Shove my fingers into the earth, put those plants in the ground, and try to keep pace with the tractor. I had time to feel the warmth of sun on my skin, the breeze in my hair, and all my other worries drifted away. I loved farming. But the blissful state didn't last long. I realized that my husband and I didn't have a future on that farm. We didn't own the land that we farmed, and we didn't have a long-term lease that would secure access for us. Because we didn't have that kind of arrangement that we could count on, we were pouring our blood, sweat, and tears, all of our sweat equity, into something that we could never pass on to the next generation. We lived in a 300-square-foot apartment in the barn, and those were some of the happiest days of our lives, but it wasn't a foundation to build a family on. And so with that story in mind, I just want to say that it's really a pleasure to be here with you all, and I appreciate the work you're doing to conserve and protect farmland, because it's not, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of people and their livelihoods behind all of these acres that you're protecting. And maybe if I would have known about the Adirondack Land Trust work back then, I would still be farming today. But in fact, my path took a turn, and one that I'm very, very happy about. I started looking for a job off farm, and I found a great opportunity with ADK Action, a member-supported nonprofit. I was attracted to the opportunity because of its founding principle that a small number of passionate people can make a big difference. So with a broad mission, ADK Action was an organization committed to sustainable community development, and it was nimble by design, favoring projects over programs to retain the ability to be innovative and address unmet needs as they arise. Well, one of those unmet needs arose in 2020 in a big way, and I saw my background in farming collide with my nonprofit work in a way I never could have imagined. When the COVID-19 pandemic took hold in New York City, my colleagues at ADK Action and I began thinking about how to best address 3 major overlapping pandemic-induced challenges: increased food insecurity and hunger, a sharp rise in unemployment, and then uncertainty faced by local farmers who'd lost access to wholesale markets. If you recall, all of the restaurants shut down, and there was a time when it felt like everyone was stocking up on food, and people weren't sure when they'd be able to safely go to the grocery store again. So during those scary times, we launched the Emergency Food Packages Project. And that's when we were able to collaborate with a wonderful network of partners, Adirondack Foundation, the Hub on the Hill, a handful of direct service organizations to help us coordinate the delivery of food from local farms right to people's doors. That effort really showed how vitally important it is to have shorter supply chains. Because we had these farms, we had the Hub on the Hill, we had the funders all right here in the Adirondacks, we were able to quickly deploy resources and bring food to people who were shut in at their homes and unable to go shopping because of comorbidities and not feeling safe to leave the house, lack of access to transportation, and so many other barriers. Not to mention the huge loss of work. So many people didn't have the funds they needed to be able to buy food. So we were able to bring these food packages from the local farms for free to people's doorsteps. For me, that was a pivotal moment when I realized that these hypothetical conversations we have about strengthening our food system are more than just hypothetical. The resilience of our local food system is critical to our future. We're living in a reality where we're hit by pandemics. Climate change is affecting our ability to have long supply chains. And the extremely efficient and top-heavy systems that are growing and supporting our globalized food supply chains are not going to last forever. And so we need to be ready. We need to support each other through a community-based food system. And the Emergency Food Packages Project proved that that was possible. At the time, many other organizations were banding together to pivot and to address unmet needs in the Adirondacks as well related to the COVID pandemic. And a group of us started to meet on a regular basis and talk about the food system holistically and how we could strengthen it for the next pandemic and during the current pandemic. So cross-sector meetings began among organizations, individuals, and service providers. Many folks from healthcare because they were so concerned about food insecurity and hunger. And then farmers as well, and organizations supporting the food system. The conversations grew into this idea of a regional food system network, or something similar to a food policy council. And in December of last year, we launched the Adirondack Food System Network. I want to thank Adirondack Land Trust for being one of our founding steering committee members. The network now has a long list of great partners, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit. I'm going to give you a short list of folks who are founding members. The organizations include Adirondack Health Institute, Adirondack Foundation, the Hub on the Hill, ADK Action, Craig Garden, ANCA, Cornell Cooperative Extension, the Adirondack Council, Comfort Food Community, and Pitney Meadow Farm. And so now we've created a framework for a network that can help to strengthen the food system across the entire region long into the future. The Adirondack Food System Network is focused on working together as equal partners to better understand the systems-wide issues, identify gaps, and find realistic solutions to help strengthen and promote a more resilient regional food system. So that's our mission, and we hope that you'll all join us in that mission. There's a critical role for everyone to play in ensuring that a community food system is possible and realized in the Adirondacks. When you go to the farmers market, look around and ask yourself who's missing here. You may notice that there's more seasonal residents than year-round residents, more high-income residents than low-income residents. And that's an issue that we need to tackle, one among many. So I want to put the spotlight for a moment on equity in the food system. And as we work to strengthen the local food system, make sure that no one falls through the cracks. Because everyone needs access to high-quality nutrition, and you really can't beat local fruits and vegetables and all of the other amazing products that are available here. So let's make sure everyone can have a seat at the table and take a bite of that local burger that Holly was describing. With that, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Brittany. It is remarkable what people bring to this work, such expertise. Thank you both, Holly and Brittany, for sharing your thoughts on farming. Next, I'd like to introduce Mary Thill, our communications manager. She'll jump in to help field some questions that you've submitted. Mary?
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to add my thanks to Holly and Brittany. Clearly, you have a lot of experience and put a lot of thought behind what you have to say, and we have a lot to learn from you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate your interest. I'll be relaying your questions this morning. We have a few already in the queue, and if you'd like to add any questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many as time permits today. And it looks like the first question is for Holly and Brittany. As young farmers yourself, or with that experience, are you seeing more people like yourselves or young farmers in the Adirondacks in this period of transition and change?
I'd say yes, absolutely. There's a lot of new young farmers in the area, and there's also a large number of farmers that are hitting that decade mark and finding ways to continue and make their operations more sustainable. Love to hear what Holly has to say as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree. You know, we know that the average age of farmers in the park is still increasing between the last two ag census reports. But on the ground, I think there's a feeling, and certainly it seems like a reality, that more and more young people are having opportunity to start farms and be involved in farming. So I think it is about just how to create opportunity for them to stay in that profession and have that long-term ability to build a career and a life in that Brittany was talking about.
Yeah, it's a wonderful movement, and it's a hard life to live, and an entire support network is really necessary and this young farmer movement needs to be nurtured and cared for it to work. Just one example, I mentioned the 10-year mark for farmers, and that's significant because there's a tax exemption on ag buildings for the first 10 years. And so a lot of farmers that have started their farm business, built their barns, built their infrastructure, suddenly they get hit with those taxes at the 10-year mark, and that can be a really difficult thing to manage. But by and large, I would say what we have going on here is the seed of something really, really wonderful that's shifting the culture and adding a lot of vibrancy and meaning to people's lives.
That's very exciting. And the next question, it looks like it's more for Mike. If Mike can come on the screen, how much of the land trust work is devoted to farmland relative to, say, forests and wildlife habitat?
Thank you, Mary. That's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, we hold conservation easements on 20 working farms in the Champlain Valley, almost 7,000 acres in agriculture, and we're about to take easements over 2 more, both in Willsboro, both on the Boquet River. So I would say it's a growing it's long been part of our program work. It's a growing sector of our land protection work, and we're investing more resources in the form of a dedicated staff person, with your help finding that person in the search, to lead that work. And I think that will generate even more leads on potential projects as they get their sea legs. So a significant part of our work historically, and I think it will grow pretty quickly once we add that capacity.
And this question follows up on kind of both of those. It's a toss-up. How can new and young farmers utilize the programs of land trusts to make their businesses more environmentally friendly, equitable, and profitable? There's a lot there. So does anyone want to take a piece of it?
I can jump in on that. I think, yeah, I'm seeing and talking with land trusts around the country that are working with young farmers on exactly that, and it's exciting to see the kinds of tools that they're exploring and using. And I think what it comes down to is really how can land trusts be a partner in making the land more affordable? Because, like I said, the economics are really tough and land, the value of land is really not being valued at what farmers can afford and pay for on a farming income. So when you're trying to get a mortgage or purchase land or get that land security that's so necessary, it's really hard to make the economics of that work out. So seeing land trusts use tools like conservation easements, but including additional provisions like the option to purchase at agricultural value, can help bring that value down to what farmers can afford. Seeing land trusts use tools like ground leases that can create long-term security without necessarily having full ownership for the farmer can create kind of a hybrid model that's really helpful. And seeing land trusts that are actually purchasing land and owning it and then making it available to farmers at the necessary or appropriate scale. And over time, seeing, we've seen in the park some lease to own projects involving the Open Space Institute and others where the land is owned and the farmer has opportunity to work into ownership over time. I think those kinds of things can all be helpful and in terms of making the economics work, but also relating back to I think the conservation and land stewardship and management, because what farmers really need to implement those practices is security. It just, we can't ask farmers to make those investments with no promise of the ability to see a return on that, both emotionally and financially, I think. And so land trusts have a really important role to play there.
Yeah, easements have been a really important tool for our land trusts traditionally, and you've described some more creative tools that we're exploring. We hope this new position will help us with. Mike, maybe could you talk a little bit more about, in addition to providing capital for farmers, how easements can help farming be more environmentally friendly, and how we work with farmers to design those tools?
Sure. So they are very flexible tools. We do pretty in-depth analysis of properties that we're considering working with conservation easements and look for things like important wetland areas and river frontage and really high quality agricultural soils. And we design building envelopes so that there's room for expansion as the farmers are more successful and want to grow the infrastructure of the farm. We have to make sure we give them enough room to do that. So they're great tools for that. And many times we'll be working on a property with, upland timber and lowland good ag soils and river frontage. So, we'll want to provide for sustainable harvest in the woods, as well as sustainable farming in the lowlands on the good ag soil. So they're great tools. They help contain values as well. They generally reduce values and make it more affordable for farmer to acquire. And they can also help farmers with estate planning, tax planning in their estates. So great tools.
There's a very related question. That there are a lot of upsides to easements, which you just described. Are there barriers for a farmer seeking to enter into an easement with a land trust that you've seen traditionally, any from the farm side or the land trust side?
Yes. They generally need good counsel to get through the process, which requires resources. They take time to negotiate. In most cases, in many cases in the Champlain Valley, at least, we've been fortunate enough to have access to funding, government funding to help underwrite the easements. But farmers, as Holly and Brittany know, work very, very hard, and certain seasons are just no-go seasons for things other than getting plants in the ground and plants and produce to market. So time is a challenge, I think, and they're complex, in some ways complex documents, and we want to make sure that they understand the relationship they're entering into with the land trust. We monitor those annually, so we work very hard to deepen those relationships over time and increase levels of trust. So as they have questions about what's permissible, they pick up the phone and call one of our conservation team members.
I think, Mary, if I could just add something to that real quick. I think that was really, well described what Mike was saying to the effect of how easements can be a challenge. And I would just add that one of the things that is really challenging about land ownership is just the inequity that's involved in that. And easements are very tied to land ownership and are often available only to individuals who have access to the ability to own land. So I think that can be an area where we need additional tools beyond easements, and to look at how they've been incredibly helpful, but we need to keep pushing beyond that, because 98% of farmland across the country is owned by white individuals, and we've seen like deep inequity built over generations in who has access as a result of policy and discrimination that's been very intentional. So I think just also there's this equity aspect there of being really intentional about what tools we're using and the effect that they'll have on building equity back into who has access and ability to work with land.
Great. I'm just reading the Q&A one more time. This is a great question for, I think, for Brittany and Holly. You talked a lot about how a community food system is possible and what we as individuals can do to support that. And we're wondering, what are some primary barriers for farmers seeking, no, wrong question. Is there a widely published list of farmers markets, times and locations? Where can we look? What are some resources to help us?
The Adirondack Harvest through Cornell Cooperative Extension of Essex County is a fabulous resource. It lists the farmers themselves, farmers market, farm stands, and both wholesale and retail purchasing options. So that's really great. There's also a brand new resource from Adirondack Health Institute that was recently created that's focused on the consumer. So especially low-income consumer, it's in print, and it's something that lays out very specifically when, where, and how folks can access food at the various farmers markets throughout the region. I'd be happy to share links to both of those with you that you can send out.
Great, we can share those afterward, or if you have a moment. I know you're doing a lot of things, but maybe we could put one of those in the chat as well. One of our staff could do that. So a related question, you talked a lot about farmland in transition earlier. In the chat, we have a question about what can land trusts do that would be most helpful to farmers considering the future of their land, whether they're transitioning due to age or other reasons.
I guess I would throw out there those, long-term deepening relationships that Mike mentioned really are absolutely critical. Sometimes it's not a question of intellectual ability to go through the processes that can be somewhat cumbersome, legally and otherwise, but really just having the time. The amount of hours that farmers work it's really crazy. I think in the summer and on the shoulder seasons for a lot of our farmers, the days are on average 12 to 14 hours long. And so there's just not a lot of room edgewise to consider other options and to really get outside of your bubble as a farmer. So I think deepening relationships and outreach to farmers and keeping an ear to the ground in the community and trying to understand when there's issues that may be arising or when there might be a farmer that is in crisis with their land and proactively reaching out and providing support would be my take.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree and add that I think the connection to public dollars that land trusts can make is also really critical with these transitions and the economics of land access and that we've been talking about. It's really tough to manage that privately, basically, and that there's, for most farmers, especially if their retirement and any equity that they've built in their business is tied up in the land. So I think bringing that connection to public dollars and public programs that we have set up and that advocates have worked to make sure stay funded, that are intended to name farmland protection as a public good and as something that we want to put public dollars towards. I think, having access to that money can really help in the transition, and that takes the form usually of a conservation easement or something similar. But the work that I do with other organizations at the federal policy level is often a lot around how can we make these programs more flexible? How can we make funding available for transition to happen in a way that gives farmers more time to work through it and gives land trusts the ability to maybe buy and hold the land, to work in the speed of the real estate market as well. So we're kind of constantly trying to tweak those programs on the DC end and the state and then I think land trusts are really important in between partners.
Yeah, one thing you just said that maybe Mike was going to chime in on as well is access to public dollars. The New York State Department of Ag and Markets has a grant that the Land Trust secured. We're working in partnership with Carly Summers at Cornell Cooperative Extension to provide things as simple as access to legal counsel, which Mike mentioned. Just a little bit of expert input for farmers, which can be out of reach without this kind of assistance, or one-on-one time with appraisers or estate planners and specialists in that kind of field. Mike, did you want to add?
I'll just briefly add that, our 768 supporters, many of whom are on this Zoom meeting, and volunteers and members of the board and members of the staff have remarkable networks that they're willing to share and leverage into the work. And when we often get questions from landowners, farmers, we can generally get to someone that can help them by simply asking this deep bench. And that's true of land trusts across the country, I'm sure, but certainly the Adirondack Land Trust is very grateful for the willingness of the members of our board and our supporters and staff to really leverage their networks into stabilizing ownerships and making good transitions possible.
On that note, I think we're getting close to the top of the hour. So thank you again, Brittany, Holly, and Mike. And to our attendees, if you have any other questions about Adirondack farming or the land trust programs, please don't hesitate to send them to info@adirondacklandtrust.org. We'll make sure that your questions get to the right person. And thank you again. This was such a pleasure.
I'll add my thanks to that. And we have a treat to close the program. Some remarkable video done by one of our staff people on the conservation team, Becca Halter, with music by Steve Langdon. of two teenage brother moose fighting in front of a game camera, and then their father coming along to break it up. So with that, we'll close and thank everyone for making time to be together. I think the video is about 2 minutes. Thank you.